I really am a true believer of a few universal laws. One is that everything does happen for a reason and in the right divine timing. And so while I feel heartbroken over the circumstances that have ultimately led to me losing my studio space, I also know that everything's happening for a reason. So after my 2 classes this morning, I meditated and a few little gems of wisdom downloaded into my heart space. And I figured I would take the opportunity to share 5 lessons that I've learned from not only being the first Black-owned Pilates space in Canada, but just about being a heart-centered, heart-led entrepreneur, a person of color in the wellness space, and ultimately a newfound community builder. Let's start with number 1. One of my personal pet peeves with the wellness industrial complex is the tendency to overcomplicate things. There's this inherent disallowance of good things to be as good as they say they are. What made this studio space so magical was its simplicity. The space itself is very uncomplicated. It wasn't actually designed to be a Pilates studio, and I just sort of made do with what I had, which obviously the bones were incredibly beautiful. We focused on contemporary Pilates that was heavily rooted in the origins of Pilates as taught by Joseph Pilates. We weren't trying to reinvent the wheel. We were just trying to be really, really good at what we knew. Simplicity also allowed me to be more flexible and functional in my offering, not being bogged down by too much stuff in terms of physical space, but also knowing what worked for clients and being able to add more of what worked and eliminate what didn't. Most of the people who were coming to the studio were brand new to Pilates. They'd never done anything like it, not even Legree, and so they wanted simplified. They wanted something that felt accessible and attainable for where they were at in that moment. So again, the simplicity of just sticking to the good old-fashioned Stott repertoire worked for a lot of people. I was also super efficient in how I operated the studio. We used a very simple booking platform. I only have 3 reformers. There were only 3 spots. Our group classes were small. We have a max of 15 people in our mat classes and 9 people in our rebounding classes. So doing everything in a really pared down, scaled down way really allowed for more spaciousness and creative freedom, and also just mental freedom as a studio owner. I mean, it was still very busy, don't get me wrong, and at times very overwhelming, but I think the magic of having the simplicity in the way that the space was organized and the way that it functioned truly alleviated a lot of potential stress. Ultimately, I think this is a lesson for life, because the reality is there is so much clutter and distraction at our fingertips and all around us. For many people, I think we tend to veer on the side of overwhelm versus maybe boredom. There's a serenity in having a physical spaciousness, meaning not a lot of stuff around, but also to just do few things and do them very well versus trying to do a lot of things and appease a lot of people. You've probably heard it. The fact that lotus flowers grow in the grimiest, muckiest conditions and yet turn out so beautifully and so fragrantly and just perfect, even though they literally grow out of darkness. There was a lot of darkness surrounding my creating and building of this space. The whole time I was building this experience, I got a lot of criticism and judgment, and I was discredited and gaslit and had my mental health impacted along the way. And yet I felt such joy and excitement coming into work, knowing that number one, I was serving my community, that it was really helping people and making a difference. And I, in my darkest times, noticed that I would really receive confirmation from the universe that yes, this is dark, yes, this is difficult, but this is exactly where you were supposed to be. those big feelings can be very narrowing. So at times where we feel challenged or frustrated or overwhelmed, or we're experiencing grief, a lot of it we tend to hone in on that thing that is causing us pain or discomfort. And I think when we hone in and we don't mindfully pause or reflect or be present to the reality as it's happening, it's very easy to get literal tunnel vision, and we only get stuck in that negative thing. Because I had a community of people and a community of guides and teachers who were all dependent on me holding it together in the best type of way, I really do feel like that, in conjunction with my own mindfulness practice and self-care and therapy, all really encouraged me to focus on the lotus flower and the growth of that flower versus the mud or the conditions that I was growing this space in. It is such an embodiment of what I've intellectualized and talked about in therapy and have read in books about, zooming out and not being stuck in that tunnel vision, but to put it into practice and seeing that truly, truly, truly beautiful things can grow from ugly places. Like, there really is light in the dark, and I believe that now more than ever because of the experience of building and growing this studio. I would also say that while I was in the mud, in the thick of it, I still made a point to prioritize my self-care and rest. And that allowed me the stamina to continue to grow and focus on the positive aspects of the experience. Not only do I know that you can grow beautiful things in ugly containers or ugly situations, but I will say that in order to grow those things, in order to see the light, be the light, welcome the light into your life, you do have to prioritize your own self-care. And that doesn't mean you'll be happy all the time or perfect all the time, but to make a point to find those pockets of self-care, because you need to rest in order to revolt. You need to rest for the revolution. You need to rest in order to be a good problem solver, a good leader, to be present, to be creative. All of these things require you at your most optimal self, or as close to optimal as possible. And we know as human beings, we need rest, we need recovery. So I think the thing that really did get me through the darkest times of building this space were my commitment and the huge, immense value I place on self-care. Some of my greatest joys would come from seeing like one of our clients in their 70s do Pilates alongside a new client in their 20s, and both feel challenged and also supported. I think in part that comes back to previous lesson of simplicity. The fact that we only had 3 reformers allowed us to be more hands-on and supportive, but I also think it's the fact that all the teachers that I had here could offer modifications and support for all levels. And so in watching the diverse range of human beings who stepped into the studio and who practiced here, I recognized that it's not just about race or gender when we talk about inclusion and diversity. There are people who are coming from injury, people who are coming from just not feeling comfortable in their body. Their bodies changed during COVID or because of pregnancy or because of life circumstances. There are also people who aren't here necessarily for the aesthetic reward. They just simply want to move in a mindful and thoughtful way, and they understand on a global level that exercise is good for them. They just are trying to find a way to exercise that feels enjoyable. As an industry, when we only push forward this message that exercise isn't worth it unless it's hard, it hurts, or you're sweating to death, or you're exhausting yourself, I think it really alienates a lot of people who are not in it for the guts and the glory. They need a third space to connect with other people. They want to feel supported. They want to feel connected in their bodies. And it really just opened my eyes, even after working in the fitness and wellness industry for over 15 years, that there are such a wide variety of reasons why people need movement and find movement, and there is such a wide spectrum of people who can enjoy it as long as it is accessible to them and inclusive for where they are at. I think inclusivity, representation, being trauma-informed means allowing the room and the flexibility for you to welcome anybody that walks into your space and have them feel seen, supported, and have them actually enjoy the practice that they've invested in. They bought into it. They paid the studio money. And so my top priority has always been to give people the best practice possible. I've now had the experience of being both a teacher in different studio spaces, working independently, and now owning and operating a studio. And I will say that I think another huge opportunity for the wellness industry to evolve is in viewing their teachers as assets versus commodities. I started teaching in my early 20s. I'm getting closer to 40 now, and not a ton has changed in terms of how the system works and having to, teach between multiple studios just to make a living wage. So I don't know. I don't necessarily have the answers, but I do see an opportunity to create a more economically sustainable and lucrative opportunity for both teacher and studio. I really, truly couldn't have had the level of success I had with this space without my teachers. And I think beyond creating collaborative economies within the studio, relationships between the studio and teachers, I really saw them as human beings. A lot of them were newer teachers, and as someone who's taught for a long time, I know, the path you go down that leads to burnout. I know how difficult it can be to deal with difficult clients. I've had all of these experiences and could sort of not only support but mentor my teachers to the best of my ability. And it really became a relationship, and for many of the teachers who came through my studio, a lifelong friendship. And I think it informs the type of leader and the type of boss that I want to be in the future. I would say part B to this lesson is that I think that there's a shift happening in terms of how we lead, how we operate businesses. I definitely got an education on the type of leader that I want to be, and I'm proud of the type of leader that I was in this space. So maybe that's like a bonus lesson in leadership, is that if you see people as an asset to what you're building, as collaborators, but beyond all of that as human beings, they really do appreciate and want to support back when they feel supported. So I think no matter what business you operate or what business you run, recognizing that it is humans, it is people who power your business, not just capitalism, that it creates an experience that is positive and reciprocal and abundant for everybody that comes in contact with your organization, your brand, your business, your offering, whatever it is that you do. Not only if you build it, they will come, but if you build it intentionally and authentically, they will come in droves. When I think back to just before I opened the doors here, I was terrified that no one would show up. I'm born and raised in Vancouver, but I've always felt a little bit like a loner, and like I never really fit in. I didn't feel like I had community, and I know a lot of people feel the same, but when it's feeling that way from the place you grew up in, I feel like it hits a little bit different. So I was really worried that I didn't have a big enough community, didn't have enough people who cared about what I was doing or what my mission or my vision was for them to show up for me. And I think not only does it pay to be authentic and cultivate trust with the people that ultimately are going to be your greatest assets for any business that you run, but I also think that they aligned and saw themselves represented not only in me as a Black woman in wellness, but as someone basically building the community that I sought to see in the world, that I wanted to be a part of. And I think that intentionality and authenticity, the combination of the two, is really what made this place pretty magical and very easy to attract aligned energies and friends and community and teachers. It's just sort of like all the stars aligned because it all started from a really honest and authentic place. When I think about like everyone's fears around AI and the robot era, I really think that nothing will ever replace humanity. There is no replacement for heart, even in hustle and hustle culture. And I think people can really feel that and resonate with that. So if you build it, they will come, sure. But if you build it intentionally and authentically, it's actually a lot easier to attract the people who need and who are looking for exactly what it is that you build and what you offer to the world. So my greatest gift, my greatest lesson, I think, from this whole experience, no matter what I go on to build, I am committed to ensuring that it is an authentic reflection of my vision, my mission, my values, and that I take my time and allow it to be built intentionally and from the heart. So on my last day in this space, I feel like I've had quite a bit of time to grieve. We've been wrapping things up now for a few months. So while I do feel sad, I mostly feel proud of what I and my team built here. I feel excited for the future. I feel like I've learned more about myself, not only as an entrepreneur, but as a Black woman, as a human being, as an adult, than I ever expected or anticipated learning. And whatever happens from here on out, this place, this whole experience changed me. And I think it changed me for the better. And really, that's all you can ask for. Okay, I'm not going to cry on the internet. I'll see you next time.